Andre Agassi, a legend holding 8 major titles, Olympic gold, and the reputation as the most dangerous returner to ever play the game, was pressed for his thoughts on Carlos Alcaraz, and his answer dropped a truth bomb that fans have whispered about, but no titan of the sport has dared to say out loud. Alcaraz isn't just a prodigy, he is the living embodiment of the entire Holy Trinity. Imagine Federer's grace, Nadal's raw fury, and Djokovic's iron will not just fragments, but the entire arsenal fused into one human being. When you actually grasp the weight of that statement, how impossible it is for one kid to channel the peak powers of 3 separate gods, you realize we are witnessing a tennis anomaly that defies history. Agassi's assessment was surgical and profound. Chatting with the ATP before the Laver Cup, he dissected exactly what makes the Spaniard's game so terrifying. He is like a genetic splice of all 3 legends, especially with the insane spin rates he generates. He has Novak's lockdown defense and Roger's supernatural touch. That isn't just hype. That is a technical breakdown from a man who went to war with the elite and understands exactly what separates a winner from an immortal. And Agassi isn't shouting into the void. Patrick Mouratoglou, the mastermind behind Serena Williams' dominance, echoed the exact same sentiment. He essentially called him the ultimate composite of the 3 greatest athletes to ever swing a racket. Even Novak himself admitted it after falling to the kid in the 2023 Wimbledon final, confessing, he's got the best of all 3 worlds. Let that sink in. The legend who just took the loss is telling the world that Carlos is a Voltron of himself, Roger, and Rafa. That isn't bitterness. That is game recognizing game, a torch passing from a current GOAT to a future one. So, let's strip away the hyperbole and look at the mechanics. Because combining all 3 sounds poetic, but what does it look like on the court? How does a 22-year-old possess the polished weaponry of 3 titans who ruled the tour for over 15+ years? Kick things off with Federer. We are talking about pure imagination and elegance. Roger made the miraculous look boring. He possessed a velvet touch and a toolkit so deep he was inventing shots on the fly that didn't even have names. He didn't just move, he flowed. Winning was secondary to painting a masterpiece on the court. Carlos carries that same spark. Look at his drop shots from deep in the corner, the laser forehands he rips on a dead sprint, and the fearlessness he shows charging the net. His knack for rewriting the script in the middle of a rally when Plan A fails, that is Federer to the bone. Mouratoglou pointed this out explicitly. He is relentlessly aggressive and wildly inventive, always looking to manipulate the ball in new ways. The explosive transition from the baseline to the kill zone, that is vintage Roger. But here is the kicker. Federer's genius came with a gamble. Sometimes the magic touch failed, or the net rush left him wide open. Beauty had a price tag. Carlos mimics that flair, but backs it up with superior court coverage to save his skin when the gamble flops. That is the evolution. He steals the creativity but patches the defensive holes. The data on the drop shot tells the whole story. Alcaraz secures 7% more points on drop shots at the majors than Roger ever did. 7% might sound trivial, but in a game decided by inches, it is a chasm. It implies he hasn't just equaled the master's touch, he might have surpassed it. And he is pulling this off at 22. Years before Federer reached his absolute prime of 25 to 28. Now, throw Nadal into the mix. This comparison hinges on ferocity, guts, and unshakable faith. Rafa was the ultimate grinder, chasing down every ball until it bounced twice, refusing to yield an inch. That gladiator mindset, that vamos fire, that willingness to die for a single point, that is what made Nadal untouchable. Carlos has that fire. Just track how many lost causes he turns into winners. Watch his posture when his back is against the wall, or the raw emotion in a 5th set tiebreak. It is like seeing Nadal's genetic code spliced into the next generation. The roaring celebrations, the grit, the refusal to bow down, it is all there. But he isn't just a clone. Nadal's ferocity often relied on extreme, body-breaking topspin that demanded a heavy physical toll. Carlos brings the heat, but with a slightly smoother, more economical stroke that spares his body. He is marrying that warrior psychology with sustainable mechanics. And then, we get to the final piece, Djokovic. This is where the plot thickens because Novak is still out there, still the man to beat, and he is the one claiming Carlos has his blueprint. Here, we are talking about the iron wall defense, elasticity, and psychological armor. Novak's superpower was flipping the script, absorbing a heavy blow, and instantly turning defense into a lethal counterattack. His elasticity was freakish, letting him claw back balls that were mathematically impossible for anyone else to touch, from stances that defied physics. But it was his psychological armor in the clutch, that uncanny knack for shifting into overdrive when the abyss stared back, that truly sculpted his legend. Andre Agassi pinpointed this exact trait, comparing the kid's unbreakable shield to the Serbian wall himself, Novak. It is not simply about survival, it is about the counterpunch. Alcaraz doesn't just float the ball back, he pulls the trigger. In a split second, he flips a desperate defense into a throat-slitting offensive strike. That is the Djokovic signature, yet Alcaraz has unlocked that mastery at the tender age of 22. Even the serve tells a ghost story. When the Spaniard tweaked his service motion recently, the commentary booth gasped it was a carbon copy of the Joker's delivery. Even Novak cracked a joke about the plagiarism, texting him, "Hey, you owe me a royalty check for that serve before the season kicks off." Carlitos laughed off the invoice but admitted the theft. He is actively downloading Djokovic's software and installing it into his own system. But here is the terrifying realization. The big three were not born perfect. They had glaring cracks in the foundation early on. Federer's backhand could be bullied into submission by high-kicking spin. Nadal's serve was originally a liability, and Djokovic used to gasp for air and struggle for footing on lightning-fast courts. They spent decades pouring concrete over those fissures to become invincible, but they began as mortals. Alcaraz, however, seems to have arrived pre-patched, having absorbed the lessons of all three simultaneously. He watched them debug their games over 15-plus years and applied those patches before he even played his first pro match. That is the cheat code of the next generation. You get to study the finished masterpiece, not just the rough sketches. Patrick Mouratoglou marveled at this duality, noting that his game fuses sledgehammer power with the softest hands in the business. Typically, a player is blessed with one or the other. To wield both? That is unheard of in this era. Just as I have never seen a 19-year-old so polished, that word complete is the key, because the Big Three's magic wasn't just their ceiling, but their lack of a floor. They became riddles with no answer. You couldn't dismantle a backhand, exploit a slow step, or break their spirit, because every stat was maxed out to 99. Alcaraz has hit that god mode at 22, a reality that keeps the rest of the locker room awake at night. The math backing this up is undeniable. By his 21st birthday, the kid already had 4 Grand Slam trophies on his mantle. Combine the tallies of Federer, Nadal, and Djokovic at that same age, and they barely match him. That isn't just talent, that is evolution. It is the synthesis of 3 lifetimes of tennis wisdom. It took Alcaraz only 60 major matches to notch 50 wins. That ties him dead even with Rafa. Roger needed 68 tries, and Novak required 64. So, he isn't trailing the legends, he is sprinting ahead of their ghosts. The head-to-head records paint the same picture. He took down both Rafa and Novak while he was still a teenager. Tragically, Roger hung up his racket before they could cross swords. Yet, the consensus is that a duel with Federer would have been electric, given the kid's creative arsenal and fearlessness. The verdict is clear. He has already slain 2 giants, and he did it while they were still dangerous, not fading relics. But this fusion runs deeper than just forehands and backhands. It is wired into his very competitive DNA. Federer worshipped the art, the sheer elegance of the swing. Nadal lived for the blood, sweat, and war in the dirt. Djokovic was driven by the cold pursuit of dominance, the hunger to own every record in the book. Alcaraz? He is the greedy heir to all 3 kingdoms. He preaches the gospel of beautiful tennis while swearing to fight to the death. He unashamedly talks about snatching the world #1 ranking and hoarding major titles. That trifecta of motivations, aesthetic beauty, warrior spirit, and ruthless achievement is what fueled the Big Three collectively. Alcaraz burns with all 3 flames at once. The mastermind behind the scenes is just as crucial. His camp has treated the last era like a university course to be aced. His mentor, Juan Carlos Ferrero, stood across the net from those titans and learned their secrets the hard way. His current strategist, Samuel Lopez, keeps that philosophy alive, constantly dissecting what made the Trinity untouchable. They carefully weave those superpowers into Alcaraz's game without extinguishing the wild spark that makes him unique. This is player development evolved. Most coaches try to force a prodigy into a rigid box, but Team Alcaraz chose a hybrid model. Protect his natural genius while bolting on the tactical armor and mental shielding of the greatest to ever play. Even his physical engine is a hybrid masterpiece. He possesses Nadal's explosive horsepower, moves with Djokovic's impossible elasticity, and glides with Federer's energy-saving efficiency. His fitness team he basically reverse-engineered their careers to construct the ultimate training blueprint. Obviously, it is not a carbon copy. Carlos is far more ferocious than those legends ever dared to be at that age. He plays with zero fear. He pulls the trigger on massive winners way sooner. It is a mix of his fiery character and how the game has shifted. Modern rackets and faster surfaces pay out huge dividends for attacking play compared to 15 years back. Carlos fights the labels, though, swearing he is his own man. "I don't measure myself against others," is his mantra. "I am just 100% Alcaraz." It is a smart headspace to be in. Getting obsessed with shadows can kill your ego. Yet, the parallels stick around for a simple reason. They are spot on. Like it or not, the kid is walking proof that he has absorbed the DNA of that holy trinity. The real mystery is longevity. Since the Titans had to constantly reinvent themselves, time forced them to change tactics. Roger streamlined his movement. Rafa beefed up his service motion. Novak turned into a wall at the net. Reinvention is slow and risky work. Carlos is staring down that same barrel. When youth fades, will that flair survive? Can his joints handle Rafa-style violence for 15 straight seasons? When one weapon jams, he has two other arsenals ready to deploy. Can he stay as iron-willed as Novak through the pain and losses? Nobody knows. But being a hybrid gives him an escape hatch. If the grind becomes too much at age 30, he can pivot to Roger's effortless grace. If his aim wavers, he shifts into Novak's lockdown defense. That range might make him more durable than the icons ever were alone. His war with Jannik adds spice because the Italian brings a totally different recipe to the court. He mirrors Novak's robotic baseline perfection, but lacks the Swiss flair or the Spanish fury. It is the ultimate clash of styles, Carlos the all-rounder against Jannik the specialist. As it stands, the hybrid model is crushing the competition. He has dusted Jannik 5 times in a row. Grass, clay, hard courts, he owns them all, wire to wire. Having 0 holes in your game is the golden ticket at this altitude. Culturally, rolling 3 icons into one body is huge. Fans spent 15 years screaming about who was the true king. Those arguments tore the community apart with their toxicity and passion. Carlos might actually heal the divide. The purists watching him get their fix of elegance. The warriors see the grit. The tacticians see the mental steel. He gives every tribe a reason to cheer. You almost never see that kind of magnetic pull in this sport. Most guys only capture a specific niche. But a prodigy blending 3 legends catches the whole world. If he keeps this up, he could become the biggest moneymaker the game has ever seen. We need to put his mechanics under the microscope, because this goes deeper than just vague buzzwords like spirit. He is replicating exact flight paths, geometries, and strategic blueprints lifted straight from the masters. Carlos executes the maneuver with identical precision. From the Swiss maestro, he stole the inside-out forehand to carve the court open. Roger used it to drag guys off the screen before ending them. He also shares that daring urge to charge the net, attacking even on deep balls to suffocate his rivals. That seamless flow from baseline to volley was Roger's trademark, and now the kid wears it. Then there is the second serve rush, another classic Swiss gambit. Nobody does that nowadays. It is suicide. But Roger did it to mess with heads and prove his nerves were ice. Carlos pulls the same stunt on match point, and he lands it just as often. That bravery is pure Federer. But when things get ugly, he borrows the lasso whip from Rafa. It is that physics-defying loop, hit on the run, that dives deep and explodes upward to ruin a perfect attack. The Spaniard forged that weapon because he had no choice, desperate to survive heavy fire without resorting to a weak slice. Carlos tweaked the recipe, less rotation, more velocity, stealing even more reaction time from the other guy. He also mastered Rafa's sprinting forehand. Most mortals running that fast are just trying to survive. Most players just bunt the ball back, praying they survive the rally. But Nadal? He defied physics, sprinting full tilt and blasting winners off one leg even when his torso was completely crooked. Alcaraz mirrors that sorcery, perhaps even eclipsing it with a first step that is faster, more violent. And his mindset on breakpoints? That is 100% Rafa. The Spaniard always found an extra gear when the pressure peaked, saving his absolute brilliance for the moments that defined the match. The numbers were baffling. He actually converted breakpoints more often than he won standard points, a statistical anomaly that shouldn't exist. You see that same freakish trend with Carlos. Put his back against the wall, and he doesn't shrink, he sharpens, unleashing his most aggressive shots. It is a killer instinct honed by years of studying how Rafa snatched victory from the jaws of defeat time and time again. Now, look at the Djokovic influence, specifically where he parks himself to return serve. Novak changed the game by hugging the baseline, sometimes stepping inside it, stealing precious seconds from the server, and flipping the script instantly. Carlos takes that aggression to the extreme, practically standing on the service line and relying on his lightning reflexes to absorb the heat. Then there is the hardcourt slide, a piece of magic Novak invented and Carlos perfected. In the old days, sliding was strictly a clay court affair. Novak shattered that rule, screeching his sneakers across concrete to reverse direction and retrieve shots that had no business coming back. Young Alcaraz turns that slide into a spectacle. often dropping into a full gymnastic split just to dig out a drop shot. That elastic defense is pure Djokovic DNA. Same goes for the lethal backhand down the line, a sniper shot used for sudden counterstrikes. Your average pro goes cross-court when under fire simply because it is the safe, high-percentage play. Not Novak. He would unexpectedly flatten out the ball down the line from a defensive crouch, stunning his opponent and ending the point in a blink. Carlos abuses this tactic, pulling the trigger exactly when his rival is leaning the wrong way, anticipating the routine rally ball. But here is the kicker: this isn't just mimicry. He weaves these superpowers together in a way the legends never could, simply because none of them possess the full arsenal of the others. Picture this. He opens with a silky Federer serve and volley, scrambles like Rafa to stay alive, and seals the deal with a cold-blooded Novak backhand. Blending those distinct styles into a single sequence was physically impossible for his predecessors. This gives him a tactical fluidity that is frankly terrifying. Facing a heavy hitter, he deploys Novak's shield and Rafa's counter-punching hammer. Up against a wall, he unlocks Federer's artistry. If they can't handle speed, he simply blasts them off the court from both sides. And for the slow-footed, he tortures them with delicate drop shots and impossible angles. There is no puzzle he can't solve because he has built his game from the blueprints of three distinct masters who ruled the sport. We have to talk about how this monster was created, because you do not just roll out of bed possessing the traits of three greatest of all-time contenders. That takes years of obsessive engineering. Juan Carlos Ferrero, his mentor, lived through the golden era and took his fair share of beatings from that trinity. So he sat the kid down, played the tapes, and dissected the specific magic of each legend. He knew exactly what made them tick and what made them unbeatable. That curriculum gave Carlos a doctorate in tennis greatness before he played his first pro match. Even the drills were hybridized to forge this ultimate weapon. Ferrero forced him to channel Federer, mandating net approaches on every single point to sharpen his transition game. To build Rafa-like resilience, partners would fire impossible shots, forcing Carlos to scramble and reset the point from the brink of death. For the Novak component, they drilled movement relentlessly, focusing on elastic slides and recoveries from contorted positions. You rarely see such a holistic regimen. Most coaches just take a player's natural gifts and polish them. Ferrero dared to dream bigger, assuming his charge could absorb everything, essentially building a Frankenstein's monster of tennis excellence. That audacious vision is the reason this experiment succeeded. Samuel Lopez, who took over later, maintained the philosophy while injecting his own flavor. It was a calculated move to patch a hole in his armor with yet another piece of Novak's toolkit. He refined the serve to mirror Djokovic's efficiency, focusing on spot hitting and a vicious kick rather than just raw speed. Even his psychologist, Josefina Cutilas, pulls from the holy trinity of tennis. She analyzes Federer's ice-cold demeanor, Rafa's weaponized intensity, and Novak's unshakable faith when the chips are down. The result is a competitive psyche that feels familiar yet radical, a hybrid beast that stands entirely on its own. It is about taking those psychological blueprints and molding them to fit the unique wiring of Alcaraz's mind. And when you look at how he builds his body, the pattern of borrowing the best parts continues. His trainer has dissected the science behind Nadal's 2 decades of explosive power, the elastic movement of Djokovic, and the sheer efficiency that kept Federer dominating into his late 30s. The goal is to construct a super athlete possessing Rafa's gas tank, Novak's rubber-like agility, and Roger's timeless durability. By fusing these distinct physical philosophies together, even what happens off the court, from his plate to the massage table, follows this all-encompassing strategy. He is adopting Novak's diet for infinite energy, Rafa's obsessive preventative routines, and Roger's smart scheduling to ensure he shows up biggest when the lights are brightest. While tailored specifically for Carlos, this Frankenstein monster approach brings us to the elephant in the room. Can it last? Merging 3 legendary playstyles sounds brilliant on paper, but asking a single human to shoulder that load for a 15-year marathon is a completely different beast. Remember, the legends layered these skills over decades. Alcaraz is attempting to master the entire spectrum from day one. It explains his meteoric rise, sure, but it also opens the door to catastrophic burnout or a muddled sense of self. We saw how Rafa's body eventually, for a guy who is only 22, it makes you wonder if his frame can actually handle the punishment of this all-out, hybrid warfare. Channeling Federer demands ceaseless invention. Channeling Nadal demands raw, bleeding emotion. Paid the price for that intensity. Is Carlos walking down that same painful path? And let's not ignore the psychological toll. Channeling Djokovic demands computer-like tactical processing. Trying to be all 3 at once is brain-melting stuff. Can anyone keep that processor running hot for 4 hours straight, week after week, season after season? Nobody has the answer key yet. We are basically watching a live lab experiment on the world stage. But if he crashes, burns, or loses himself trying to wear too many masks, history will say he flew too close to the sun. I want to hear your take. Is he truly the chosen one who unites the Trinity? If he dodges the injuries and holds this pace for another 10 years, the experiment is a genius triumph. Or is this just desperate hype from old guard icons hoping the golden age doesn't end with them? Is a perfect hybrid even possible? Sound off in the comments below. If you are hungry for more deep dives into this tennis phenomenon, smash that subscribe button. We are dissecting every layer of his evolution as he attempts to rewrite the record books. Catch you in the next video. We are already seeing red flags on the medical charts, hamstrings popping, abdominal tears, and foot issues.